Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. Welcome to my channel if you've not joined me before. Welcome back if you are returning. So it is nearly the end of November, nearly the beginning of December, the last month of the year. And I have had the most corking reading month. I can't wait to fill you in on all these lovely books that I've read. I think probably because the weather's changing, etc., etc. I've snuggled up and done more reading, but also I've just been very, very lucky. Every single book that I've read this month, I have thoroughly, thoroughly adored. So the first one is called The Golden Legend by Nadeem Aslam. Now, I have read lots of Nadeem Aslam's books before. I think he's one of my favourite writers. He's Pakistani heritage, I think has lived in Britain, I think. This novel is set in Pakistan. He writes about love in the most honest and exquisite way. He doesn't romanticize people's lives. Terrible things happen to his protagonists, and often the stories don't reach any sort of happy conclusion. But I just really enjoy his scrutiny of relationships, and also the fact that he writes so beautifully about Pakistan, about Kashmir, about, you know, that sort of region of the world. So this story, I mean, the setting that he's chosen is stunning. So it's two architects living in Pakistan, and they have a converted paper factory that they've made into a house. And the description of the house that you first encounter is through a child's eyes. They have living in their garden a young girl called Helen who lives with her father. There's no mother around, and she's kind of adopted by the two architects who don't have any children of their own. And she is in this room that's, I suppose, like a massive library, but suspended from the ceiling are these two huge paper mosques. And they're reconstructions, one of a famous mosque in Cordoba in Spain, and the other one of my brain these days, Hagia Sophia. And just the way she describes these beautiful buildings hung from the ceiling, and they obviously use them as their inspiration. So I loved all of that. I loved all the sort of the importance of architecture and the importance of books actually in the story. And the novel opens with a fantastic concept. So the two architects have designed a brand new library for their city, and all the schools in the city have come out onto the streets, and they form this human chain from one library to the other, and all the books are being passed to be passed along the human chain to be rehoused in the library. I mean, what's not to like about that as a concept? But unfortunately, there is an attack, a gun attack, and in that gun attack, Masood is shot and killed, and that happens within the first few pages. So I'm not, you know, it's not a spoiler. I can't say an awful lot more about the rest of the novel because there's lots of twists and turns, and there always are in Aslam's books. He spends years writing them, and you know, he's really sort of, I think, devoted his life. I get the impression he's perhaps a little bit reclusive, I don't know, but he's sort of devoted his life to creating these works and spends hours revising and editing them. And I just think they are just beautifully crafted books. You get taken to an amazing island in the story. You meet rich and poor characters, but at the root of it all is love and generosity, and you know, the sort of horror of the things that go on in the world, despite, you know, humans striving for the best. So there we are, The Golden Legend. I can't go on about it enough. I loved it. Next up was something very, very different. So I don't think I would ever have picked this book up because the cover is just not something that would have appealed to me. Except there are two things. One was that I've read many of Ursula Le Guin's. I don't know why I'm holding it right at you like that. It looks a bit threatening, doesn't it? I've read many of Ursula Le Guin's short stories, but never actually, and also loved. There was a series of books that she wrote for children. Called one was called The Wizard of Earthsea was the first one, that's right. And I loved those when I was a child, but I've never read any of her adult novels. So I was looking some time ago when I was in London with Simon, and I was my son, and I was looking of Savage Reed's fame. He'll tell me off if I don't say that. Anyway, not the fame bit, the Savage Reed's bit. Anyway, so we were in this bookshop, and I went to look at the Ursula Le Guin section because I wanted to read a novel of hers, and I saw this, and who knew that she had written a retelling of the Aeneid, but it's only a section of it, the second half of the Aeneid by Virgil, so a Roman epic poem, and in that epic poem, our hero Aeneas is destined to marry Lavinia when he settles in Rome. And he's travelled all the way from Troy to get to Rome, to found Rome. So Rome isn't actually there yet, it's pre-Rome. In fact, it's hundreds and hundreds of years before the Rome that we came to know of Romulus and Remus fame, etc., etc. Anyway, so he comes and... actually, it's not hundreds of years before. Anyway, don't worry about all of that. So he comes to settle in Italy, and there have been many prophecies about what should happen when he gets there, where he should build his city. And there have been lots of sort of trials and errors on the way. And eventually he arrives there, and he is destined to marry Lavinia. The oracles have all said so. Her father, Latinus, also understands that the gods are saying that she should marry Aeneas. However, she had previously been promised in marriage to Turnus, who is a local prince and very sort of passionate, feisty character. And in this version of the story, she's not totally sure that he's the right man for her. And so basically, Ursula Le Guin retells this whole section of the story that is about Lavinia, except that in Virgil, Lavinia doesn't say a single word, not a word throughout the whole of that section of the book. She never says a word. The only thing she does is that she blushes at one point to show her modesty. So what Ursula Le Guin has done is has given voice and character to this woman, and she's fabulous. I really, really loved her. She's really in tune with nature. She's in tune with the spiritual world. She's in tune with the gods. And she goes to, part of her responsibility as a young princess is to tend one of the local shrines where she's expected to go and actually sleep there on her own and sort of commune with the gods. And while she's doing that, the spirit of Virgil appears and talks to her and kind of tells her hints about her future. And the relationship between her and Virgil is really interesting, and the whole sort of dream world that she exists in. And the other thing that I loved about it was that it doesn't end where the Aeneid ends. So the novel sort of projects beyond what Virgil gave us in the Aeneid and shows us sort of what kind of happens next. So for anyone who's a fan of the Aeneid or a fan of Virgil, I really would recommend this for that reason. But it reads as a brilliant story in its own right. I really enjoyed it, and it's just very unusual, and I'm really glad that I just stumbled across it, because I really don't think I would have found it any other way. So there we go, Lavinia, Ursula Le Guin. Next up is this magnificent treat. So this is actually non-fiction. It is non-fiction November, and this was partly why I read this. But the main reason I read this was because for my birthday treat, my lovely son Simon, Savage Reeds, had booked a barn for us to go and stay in for a long weekend, and I knew we were going to be on the other side of the Red Hill of this book's title. So it's called On the Red Hill by Mike Parker. Mike Parker is a journalist, writer. He wrote a book called Map Addicts. And this book is just, some books tap into your soul. And this book tapped into my soul in a way that very, very rarely happens when I read. The way that he writes about the natural world, about the trees, about rivers, about landscape, about the seasons. In fact, the whole book is kind of framed around the idea of the seasons. I just found it astonishing. It was almost as if somebody was speaking some of my thoughts. So I loved it for that reason. I love it because of the story it tells. It's a very frank, I think, and unsentimental but beautiful exploration of a relationship between two elderly gay men that Mike and his partner Preds get to know and love in their latter years. And it all centres around this house called Rugach, which George and, oh my goodness, that's awful. My age, Reg, that's right, which George and Reg own and ran as a B&B. And Preds and Mike get to know them and absolutely love Rugach, this old house, which Preds actually first encountered when he was a child and walked past it and thought, oh, I'd love to live there. That's the sort of place I'd like to end up. So George and Reg have a civil partnership very late in life. Mike and Preds are present for that. And so it kind of explores the difficulties of being gay, living somewhere very rural. It gives you don't often necessarily get a rural perspective on that. And it's something that's very close to my heart, is the fact that, I think in rural communities very often being in a minority is hard enough. I think it can be incredibly challenging when you're a very, very, very tiny minority, or at least you appear to be. So Mike tells the story of George and Reg. He goes back and looks at their younger selves and the experiences he had. George was quite a troubled character, and he sort of tries to sort of understand why George behaves in the way he does, because he's not always pleasant, I suppose. Mike and Preds also inherit Rugach when the couple die, and again there's a wonderful story around the way that happens. So it's such a human, such a generous, such a thoughtful, and it's beautifully written. The language is stunning. And then I was lucky enough to actually go and visit them and get to chat to them and enjoy a fabulous meal with them. So, I felt very, very privileged to be able to do that. It was lovely to meet them. So yeah, that's On the Red Hill by Mike Parker. Thoroughly recommend it. Next up is The Promise by Damon Galgut. I'm very late to the party here because this won the Booker Prize, I think, in 2021. I haven't read anything yet by Damon Galgut, so I was really intrigued by this, and it did not disappoint me at all. Set in South Africa, Damon Galgut is a South African writer, and it starts in, I think was it 1989, 1986? Anyway, the late 80s, and it centres around a single family. It's a family saga, I suppose, if you want to see it like that. It opens with the death and the funeral of the mother of the family. But prior to her death, the daughter, Amor, has overheard a conversation between her parents, and her mother has requested of her father and made him promise that at her death, a house that belongs to them on their property, that their servant Salome lives in, black servant, that the house should be given to her so that she's got this safety. And actually, I think I'm right in saying, and I think it's mentioned in the novel, that wasn't actually legal at the time, but it became so later on. Anyway, needless to say, the promise is not fulfilled. And this kind of sparks a whole sort of sequence of disruptions in the relationships between the different members of the family, because there are 3 children. And there are 2 further deaths, 2 further funerals in the novel. I'm not going to spoil it by saying whose they are, but at each funeral you kind of jump forward 10 years or so, and you meet the family again, and you kind of catch up on what's happened to them in between. So it's very much, for me, really interesting, because it's a novel about death. It doesn't hold any, it doesn't sort of, what's the word? I think we tend not to confront death very much in our society. And I'm talking here about British society, white British society, because that's kind of what I know. I think we sort of, it's all become very clinical. We don't necessarily make wills. We don't talk about, what we want for our funerals. I think we airbrush death out, which is absolutely ludicrous, isn't it? When you think that it's the one thing you can guarantee that's going to happen to you. I don't want to be morbid, but it's true. So anyway, so I think one of the things that I loved about this was the way that it does discuss all of that, lots of rituals around death and what happens at funerals, etc., etc. So I liked it from that point of view. But it's quite a thin novel, but there is so much in here. Obviously it's the backdrop is the disintegration of apartheid in South Africa, and I loved the way that was happening in the background. And you could really feel the effects that was having on the family, but it wasn't foregrounded at all in the novel, and I thought that was really clever. There's just so much to say about this book. The descriptions of the family and the house, and of Amor's life and the decisions that she makes. And the other thing I love about it is the way that it's narrated. So I don't think I've quite read a novel that does this in quite the same way before. It's narrated in the third person, so you are constantly flitting around, but you get really inside the heads of the characters, and so it's kind of narrated through their thoughts almost. And he flits around from one character to another, and you'll suddenly think, oh, it's not her, it's him now. But he does it seamlessly. It's so clever, the way that you sort of think, you'll read a bit and it's only a sentence and you think, oh, this is not that person, this is the other person. He also has occasionally the dead narrate. I just loved the way he got it's more than an over-the-shoulder narrative in my mind. It's like he's right in the heads of all these different characters, so your perspective is shifting all the time. Loved it. I can really see why it won the Booker Prize. There we go. Then we have The Fell by Sarah Moss. Now I read another novel of hers, what's it called? I can't even remember, but it was set in Northumberland. It was about an archaeological dig. This novel is set in the Peak District during lockdown, and I thought her take on lockdown was just brilliant. The kind of it focuses on a woman who is having to self-isolate with her teenage son. It's just the 2 of them. They live together in this bleak sort of Peak District village, and she absolutely cannot cope with not being able to leave the house. And eventually she cracks and goes off up the fell to try and just get a sense of space and sanity. And things go terribly wrong. So it's a real exploration. I'll try that again. It's a real exploration of her psychology and her psyche. And she's quite an unconventional, sort of slightly hippie sort of character. But also it's a wonderful exploration of her son's character too. and he's quite unusual too. You know, he's very sort of responsible. How he deals with her disappearance is really interesting. And you also see it from the point of view of the rescue service as well. So the mountain rescue team, who one of the rescuers is a key character. And again, you sort of look at that through his perspective as well. I mean, I'm always fascinated by those people who are prepared to put their lives at risk. Very often when the people who are stranded up the mountain or whatever are there because they've made some very silly error of their own. So there's all of that. There's the and just the whole sort of backdrop of the pandemic, because you quite quickly forget just how bizarre and weird that whole period was. So I kind of enjoyed the reminder of that. I think Sarah Moss writes so wisely, and again, her prose is beautiful. It's really poetic, just enjoyable, you know, sentence after sentence of wonderful language. So yeah, I recommend this really highly. And finally, last but definitely not least, I don't know if you can see this because it's a proof copy. I don't think has it even got the title on, but look how beautiful that is. You can see stars, you can see the sea, you can see a boat. This is The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. Jess Kidd is a wonderful Irish writer. I've read all her books and loved every single one of them. And this is quite different from the others. It's set in 1628. It tells the story of a boat called the Batavia, which was sailing from Amsterdam to Southeast Asia as part of the Dutch East India Company. And on the boat is a young girl called Macon, who is travelling. Her mother's died, and she's travelling to Batavia because travelling on the Batavia to Southeast Asia because her father's a very wealthy man. He lives out there. She's never met him, but because her mother's died, she's going to go and live with him. So it tells the story of the voyage, which took months, and eventually the ship was shipwrecked and stranded on a coral reef. And it tells the story of how the survivors cope with that. And it's based on a true story too. You know, this ship really did exist, and the shipwreck exists and has been found. So I found, you know, I love books that are set on old boats. You've got that, it's sort of a bit like a pirate ship in my head, and some fantastic characters, old sea dogs, and Mycon is a very curious, quite a naughty girl in many ways. She goes off and does things that perhaps she shouldn't. She explores below deck. She's not the sort of coy young maiden that she's supposed to be. She also has a nursemaid with her called Imka, who she's very, very close to, and the relationship between those two is fascinating as well. But there's a parallel story as well that's happening in 1989, and it's about a young boy who's growing up on the island that they got stranded on in the ship, or that group of islands. Or at least I say he's growing up there. He's moved there to be with his granddad, Joss, because his mum's died too. So there are parallels between the two narratives, and the whole sort of sense of place, that terrible. I mean, some of the things that survivors of this shipwreck do to each other are absolutely hideous. And the island that they're wrecked on is just very flat, very barren. There's just nothing there. There's no fresh water, no vegetation. And even in 1989, this space is really, I don't know, there's lots of tension between the people who are living there or trying to live there. There's a lot of seasonal drift. So people will come and stay there for part of the year, and that whole sort of sense of insecurity and unease in the community, and some real violence as well. So yeah, it's just a fascinating exploration, really, of what human beings are capable of when they're trying to survive, and the decisions that they'll make against each other. But also, again, some of the bonds that are formed, you know, the positive bonds that are formed in those types of circumstance. And it's a rip-roaring, rollicking bob along the ocean as well, if you like that sort of thing. So really, yeah, I really enjoyed this too. Anyway, that's it. You know, I had the most cracking reading month. I'm hoping that December will bring into my hands some beautiful books too. I'm romping through one at the moment, but I'm not going to spoil things by telling you about that one. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and well, I'm just rabbiting on. I'm tired now. I need to go and cook tea. So yeah, anyway, take care everybody. Look forward to seeing you hopefully next week. Bye.